Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi is beginning the fifth parak and the final parak of Beitzah, parak Hey. Mishnah Aleph. Mashilin perot derech aruba biyom tov. You can push produce on your roof through the skylight, the opening in the ceiling, on Yom Tov. The Gemara actually has a gear, so it might be mashilin, not just mashilin. Avalo b'Shabbat. You cannot do so on Shabbat. Now, the idea here is somebody put his produce on the roof to dry out. For example, he wants to turn his grapes into raisins or create dried figs, and he sees that there are storm clouds coming, and it's probably going to rain. So, in general, our sages prohibited, they made a rabbinical decree against tircha, extra exertion on Yom Tov. They don't want extra tircha. You want to enjoy yourself. But there are certain leniencies when it's devara of it, something that's going to get lost. So if the dried fruits get soaking wet again on the roof, that's a loss. So the Gemara describes how you could do the minimal exertion of, just pushing it over, on top of the roof to fall down into the house below, but to pick it up and put it through a window on an adjoining roof, maybe that's too much exertion already. The Mishnah continues, you can cover your produce that's already in the house, with a cloth or an apron or a sheet of plastic or something, so they're not going to get soaking wet. And also wine and oil. You don't want the rainwater dripping in to get into those. And you can even put an empty kli under the drips to catch the water. But Shabbat, even on Shabbat. Now, the idea here is on Shabbat, we really don't want any extra tircha, but here, even on Shabbat, it's allowed because these are a minimal amount of tircha to prevent the damage. Now, I turn to Mishnah Beit, a very important Mishnah. Kol shechayivin alav mishum shvut. Anything that you are chayiv not to do this activity because of shvut. Now, shvut is a cognate of Shabbos or Shevet, sit, refrain. It's a rabbinic injunction to prevent us from doing a biblical level of prohibition. Or mishum reshut. Now, reshut is like you have reshus, you have permission. It's an optional mitzvah, not something you have to do. Mishum mitzvah, or something that's actually a mitzvah, but the rabbi said don't do it on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Chayavin alav b'Yom Tov. So if it's a Shevut issue on Shabbat, it's also an issue. It's also a prohibition on Yom Tov as well. Mishum Shevut. These items are examples of Shevut. Lo olin be'ilan. We don't go up a tree because you might break off a branch. We don't use a tree at all. Actually, if somebody hangs their hat or their jacket on a tree branch on Shabbos, guess what? It's stuck there for the remainder of Shabbos. Lo rochvin al gabei behema. We do not ride on an animal. It could easily leave the tchum. You could also break off a stick to guide the animal. Lo shatin al pnei mayim. We do not swim on the water. Somebody might inflate their flotation device if they're swimming. There are certain Gemaras that mention just going down into a pond or a mikveh to cool off, but actually swimming is an issue. Maybe it depends on the depth. Lo mitapchin. Mitapeach is clap hands. Lo misapkin, and we don't slap thighs, or maybe banging on the table could be included. Velo miraktin, and we don't dance. Now, these are music-associated activities. And if people start singing and dancing and clapping and banging and there's a rhythm, and then someone's going to bring out his banjo and then come to tune up his banjo or fix the broken string, and you'll have a biblical prohibition. Now, we don't paskin from a Mishnah, but I have heard poskim say that in modern times, our dancing, which is basically walking in a line holding hands, is not real halachic dancing. The Gemara says dancing, a real dance is where you're already picking up one leg before the other leg even hits the ground. So it's something that's quite more involved than walking in a line. These items are reshut, lo danin. We do not judge. We do not judge a case. Lo mekodshin. We do not do kiddushin. That is the first stage of a Jewish marriage, the betrothal stage, like giving the ring. Lo cholzin. We do not do a chalitza. That's the case where the woman did not want to marry the brother of her deceased husband who had no children. Lo miyamin, or do the yibum, which is in the case where they did want to get married, the widow and the surviving brother, the man with no children. So these are all mitzvot. Judging is a mitzvah, but we don't do these on Shabbat or Yom Tov because usually people write something down associated with these. The Gemara explained they might not be such an amazing mitzvah because usually a mitzvah of chalitza or yibum is the oldest brother. Maybe this is the second oldest brother. Now the Mishnah adds, "Ve'elu hen mishum mitzvah." These are things that are a mitzvah, but we still have a rabbinic prohibition doing them on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Lo makdishin, we don't make hekdesh, like donating something from to the temple or decreeing an animal is sacred as an offering. Lo ma'arichin, we do not designate an erech, that's a vow to pay someone's value, as stated in the Torah. Lo mahrimim, a harem is a different kind of vow to Bedek Abayis or the Kohanim. Lo magbihin truma or meiser, we do not lift up, meaning separate, the mitzvah of separating truma or meiser, because actually the food can't be eaten. The food is tevel beforehand. So separating the tithes is sort of like tikkun kli, because now you can use the food you couldn't use beforehand. The Mishnah concludes, Kol elu, all of these items, b'yom tov amro, kal v'chomer b'Shabbos. Our sages say these are not allowed rabbinically on Yom Tov, and certainly on Shabbos, where we're even more strict. This is the mirror image of the statement that the Mishnah opened with, that says there's things as Shevut, which we invented for Shabbos, that the rabbis now are saying that apply to Yom Tov as well. Now finally, Ein Bein Yom Tov LeShabbos, there's no real difference in Yom Tov and Shabbos, Eile Ochel Nefesh Bilvad, except for food preparation, what needs to be eaten for the nefesh, for the people. As we've said throughout this tractate, through this Masechta of Beitzah, different types of food preparation that are needed for human consumption are allowed on Yom Tov. Yeshar kochachem, sei gesund.